Good evening, everybody. Susan has asked me to give you an insight into the tides. Now, I'm no expert, but I have spoken to many experts, and there are some experts around here who could probably give us some additional tips and information. But I'll explain to you where this originally came from, and hopefully everybody here, regardless of how experienced you are or not, will get something out of it. So without further ado, that's, by the way, that's Sunburn, two-handed Azora race coming up towards Killiney in a 30-knot squall, caught with the number one up. And there were just two of us on board. Ryan Kearns trimming with a big grin on his face when he took that photograph. He said he thought he'd done a lovely job trimming. So the article on the website, which is in the racing area of the website, was written by me, but really just pulled together. And what actually happened was, I'd started sailing here in the early 80s and was going around asking everybody, what's the story with the tides around here? I can't get my head around it. It's very confusing, it's very complicated. And it was a secret art. Nobody would tell you anything. There was absolutely no way you could find out. So I put 12 sheets, 6 copies, and I gave them to a couple of fishermen and a couple of people that I considered to be experts at the time. That included Dennis Toomey, Paddy Cronin, Ian Malcolm, Francis Ennis, Dave Doyle. And Dave Doyle was one of the local fishermen. He sails here now. His dad had a copy, the only known copy of the original Board of Works survey, which covered the whole sound before they built the pier extension. So he promised he would access that as well. So there was a little bit of scientific input to it, but not a lot. It was just to give a feel that we could share with everybody to break this secret society. So that's the way we did it. So I consolidated, gave them the 12 sheets. They did each hour of the tide, ebb and flow. We consolidated it 3 times. We went back in drafts. And then at the very end, one error was identified by one of them, and they said they weren't going to say what it was because they'd be associated with validating it. So I said we were going to publish it anyway. And then he told me what the error was, and we circulated the error, and they all said, oh, we forgot that. So what's on the website was put up, and in the slide here, it's actually not correct. It's 1992, because the internet didn't exist in 81. And we put it up and shared it with everybody. And in fact, it's gone out with most notice of races for regattas and open events. And it's fairly accurate. So there's a lot of detail in it, but do have a look at it if you haven't seen it already. It's a little bit awkward to find on the website, but it's under race area, and you'll find it there. So as we're starting from basics, this is what happens in a spring tide in our area when the sun and the moon are in line. And that's what happens in a neap tide when the sun and moon are at right angles to each other. And that's something that you need to think about when you're considering tides. If I'm losing anybody, because this is pitched at people who are newcomers to HYC, newcomers to the area, newcomers to sailing in some cases, just put your hand up and we'll cover the point again. Really important concept is about waves. A wave motion moves forward, but the particles within the wave only move vertically. So there's no forward movement of the particles of water. And that's the difference between tidal streams and tidal height. So the tidal wave is going to be the height, low water, high water, and you can see it there, the waves and troughs. The tidal streams are completely different. They're linked and associated, but you need to remember all the time that the tidal wave is the horizontal movement, the tidal stream is the horizontal movement of the water, which is what you see flowing around a lobster pot or around a buoy. And the tidal range is created by the wave, which is the vertical movement of the water. And just, you probably need to consider that and think about it, but that is the key to unlocking understanding tides in the areas in general. The other impact is the Coriolis effect, which is the water going down the sinkhole, which in our area is the northern hemisphere is deflected to the right. So that means that with the rotation of the Earth, the water is vector across into Liverpool Bay in our case. And that's why you get 4-metre spring tides in our area here along the east coast, and you get 10-metre springs in Liverpool. The water's been chucked across there. When you're racing in the area in particular, you need to consider that. It's quite important, particularly because of wave reflection. And I'll come back to that a bit later, because for some of the racers here, this is something that's not widely known. It's probably something I probably kept a little bit secret myself, but somebody very expert told me about it some years ago. And the other impact, which is to a lesser degree, is atmospheric pressure. That's relevant because it can move the null point of the tide north or south in the Irish Sea. And the difference is surprisingly 1 centimetre for every 1 hectopascal. So if you just don't need to think about the numbers, but it's surprising it has that much of an impact. So if you have high pressure, you will have greater depression on the sea, and the levels will drop. If you have low pressure, the opposite will happen. To illustrate the difference between streams and tide, most of you would be familiar with the rule of twelfths, where you can work out the tide, yeah? There's a rule of thirds, and you'll get copies of these slides from Susan, so don't be too worried about looking at the detail. The rule of thirds will work out the tidal stream. So there's a different formula for working out both, is really what the point is, just to emphasize that they are very, very different, okay? Any questions, anybody so far? Are you all with me? Everybody happy? Okay. This is our sailing area, and what this illustrates is in here you have Baldoyle, you have Malahide, and then beyond that you have Rogerstown. The main stream in the tide in the Irish Sea runs north-south, but because of the volume of water this takes to fill up these inlets, it's deflected to the northwest on the flood and to the southeast on the ebb. And in the middle we have these beautiful islands of ours, which add to the complexity of the whole thing as well. Okay, but the filling up of the inlets on the flood is a very important. It's the fundamental concept to understanding the tides in the area. And again, the ebb, they'll flow. You can imagine it's going up north-south, and it's pulled in. But they're very, very substantial inlets. There's a substantial body of water to fill up. So, to recap, the tides are influenced by the geographic features, the islands, Baldoyle Estuary, Malahide Inlet, Rogerstown, wave reflection from Liverpool Bay, and that is, for people who race, is really important. Des McWilliam told me this. He was actually cutting our sails to actually match this feature. And because the waves come reflected from Liverpool Bay, very often when you're sailing to weather, you'll find one tack the waves are more parallel, and another tack they're more on the nose. And that means that you require a different car setting on your genoa, you need more twist in your main. And just watch the waves. Most people think, I'll set the cars up the same about tack, and off we go. And that works in Cork, it works in virtually every other place that we'll be racing around. But in our area, the waves are asymmetric to the wind. And it's a really neat little trick, because you do need to change your car positions on both tacks in most cases. The other one that's really, really important, particularly if you're one designs like Squibs, Pateer 17s, and you're racing in the Sound, is that in the Sound, the stream sets 45 to 90 minutes, and sometimes more, before the flood and ebb. So before or after high water. So it's basically, if you go out and high water is 5 o'clock, the stream is already going out at 4 o'clock on a typical day. And sometimes more. It can be an hour and a half. And the reverse is also true. That also happens in at the Cushmark, along Portmarnock Beach, and when we see in some of the chartless, it'll create some back eddies around Balscadden and at the back of Ireland's Eye as well. But that's particularly if you're racing in the Sound, makes a huge difference to the decisions you make as to where you start, whether you go to the side when you're coming up to the finish, or whether you go to the middle. And it is totally different to the time of high and low water, always. It's never the same as high and low water. So it's really important, keep an eye. The one useful thing that lobster pots do, they'll give you a clue as to what's happening with the tide. But the navigation marks and the racing marks, always keep an eye out and watch what the wake on them is doing. Because around here, things happen at different times all the time. And then again, just to reiterate, to remember that the tide is a wave, and it moves vertically. The streams are horizontal, and they're mainly driven by the tidal wave, wind, and Coriolis effect. So they will happen at different times, and that'll become a little bit obvious now in a second. So these are the little chartlets from the website. And what you can see there is the largely north-going flood tide diverted to the west. And then, if you can see here, you'll get back eddies in off the spit and at the back of Ironside. This one at the back of Ironside is really useful if you're racing around the back. You can actually gain 2 or 2.5 knots speed, and you'll be watching somebody 100 meters further north from you, and you'll be going half the speed. It's quite dramatic. Not so much on this one here, but certainly, and in Balscadden, you have a similar effect. So if you're well into the flood, you will find that back eddy if you're sailing against it. So it's well worth going in to get it out. Similarly, on the ebb, you'll get reverses. And again, bearing in mind that we're typically sailing in a westerly or northwesterly breeze, that these things become very important. If you're sailing in northwesterly on a beat against this, and you're there rather than here, the difference is probably 2.5 knots, typically, which is an awful lot. And similarly, at Balscadden, if you'll excuse the language, what Dennis Toomey, the late Dennis Toomey, used to say, if you're beating to Balscadden, and that's it, get in off the pier and pinch like hell. You know, so.
How close have you to be in to get the eddies?
Not as close as you think, but at the back of Ireland's Eye, you can put your fenders out for the bulk of it up to towards the Martel, up to Half Tide Rock. You know, say when you get up to Martel, but you can actually sail inside Half Tide Rock if you're daring. But probably within 50 meters. Like, it's not, you don't have to be as close as you think. And obviously the other one I'll show you on the smaller chartlet. This one here is very tempting, but there is a rock there. Now, it's a full boat length out, and Paddy, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about a full boat length out, and it's about the size of a large car. And it's actually more of a reef than a rock, called the Steer. And it is very shallow at low water. So it's one you have to watch. This one is visible at half tide. You can see it most of the time. And the rest is pretty okay, you know, around Ireland's Eye. You can go in fairly close. And likewise, Balscadden, only in here are you in danger. It's deep water all around. But the winds in Balscadden are all over the place, as most of you know. That's an illustration of the ebb in the Sound. But again, there's a lot of text associated with those little chartlets on the website. We can put a link in the thing or whatever, because it is not that easy to find on the website. So again, I'm going on about this again, tidal streams in the Irish Sea. So to really slack water, you'll see around Dundalk Bay. And that moves a little bit north and south, depending on what the prevailing winds will be doing. If you've got northerly winds or southerly winds, it'll move a little up or a little down. If you've got higher low pressure, for a period of days, it'll move up or down. And really what I'm trying to illustrate here is that there's where slack water and the streams are, but down around here is where basically the null point on the tide is. And around about Arklow and Cahors Point, the tidal range is only 1 metre, about the same as the Mediterranean. And so you don't really need to think about high and low water in around Arklow, because it's a very, very small tidal range. And that's because the null point between the streams and the tidal wave are different. And that's just to illustrate that if you start thinking about things like that, you'll gain a very good understanding as you go on. So they're not exactly aligned, okay? That was me. Any questions? Yeah.
Can you explain how those eddies are actually happening?
Yeah, it's like say in a car. If you look at, say, the bonnet of your car going up over the windscreen, you've got laminar flow. So you've got you've got a flow of air in between the main air barrier going over, and you can see it looks fairly smooth. The wipers aren't they're all working, but beyond that, you get quite turbulent air. So similarly in water, close to the edge, you will get friction, and the friction slows down the water that's running along there to the point where it reverses its flow. And that's what happened. If you go down to the end of the pier and watch when the tide is ebbing, you'll see it clearly. If you're watching birds that are sitting down at the bottom, you see one here going that way, another one there going that way. And it's very obvious, but it's caused by friction.
There have to be more questions.
Jerry, now I'm going to be disappointed.
One of the ones actually that people don't forget or very seldom use is when they're going to the Bailey or going to the Bailey
Yeah.
and coming back.
Yeah,
If you're coming back, as often is the case, you're coming back when the ebb is in.
yeah,
Come close to the Bailey and go in around, into the cliff and round.
Hmm.
And there's a back eddy there.
yeah.
That's at least a knot and a half. That's in that little
In that.
bay, and it's fairly wide between
Yeah.
Bailey and the
And,
next point.
and you know the one south of that, the other side of the bay from the Bailey,
Southern side.
the Sutton side,
Yeah.
it's permanently going west.
It is, yeah.
The tide never reverses. It's permanently going west.
There's something else we need from you, Robbie, is a map of all the rocks, so we know exactly how far in we can come.
What I was saying, at the lowest astronomical tide umpteen years ago, Ian Malcolm and myself went out when the crash boats were Delkey dories. Very few people remember that. You might, Tom, would you? Do you remember we had the Delkey dories, not ribs? Remember the
Because
fiberglass?
We had those here because
Yeah,
boys were driving them.
yeah, but they were our crash boats. They were our crash boats at the time. And Ian Malcolm and myself went out in one, and we took a photograph of him standing on each rock.
And have you still got those?
No, but when we published those, the Admiralty got in touch with me. Could we give more precise latitudes and longitudes for the rocks? And then they realised that they were not a hazard to shipping; they were inshore rocks, and they said, "Oh, that's okay, forget about it." But they were surprised because they hadn't got them on their chart. But anyway, that's yeah. So. Anyway, if you have any questions, a lot of people do know about these, but it is a bit of a kind of, people don't like to divulge information on them, but it's out there now in the public domain, and hopefully people will build upon it. I'd love to see somebody, at the time we did that piece of work, it was just to share it with people. We got a lot of criticism because it wasn't on a scientific basis, but nearly 30 years later, nobody's gotten around to doing anything better, and it's so much easier to do it now. I can't imagine that somebody hasn't done it. But one of the problems is learning it locally and observing what happens at the time is much more important. It's very difficult to predict. I think as Jerry was saying earlier, you can be at the Cush mark or the hub mark, and 7 days in a row, the tide at any one particular time could be 180 degrees difference for the same state of the tide. So observation is crucial. And looking at the other boat and seeing, are they gaining? If the wind is the same, why is he going faster? He's likely to be in a back eddy.
Ian, to go back to your chart of Ireland's Eye, you said there's a rock somewhere around the stack mark.
No, it's the other end actually, Michael. Yeah, but
Between the tower and the cave.
yeah, in here. Just at the head of that arrow nearly, Jerry, isn't it?
Okay, right.
Yeah, and it's the biggest half-tide rock. It's normally,
Because I popped around on this stack thinking I was safe. And I
there is one sort of there, but it's too close in, it won't affect you at all. You know, you can go in pretty close.
thought it was the other side.
Yeah, and the stack is steep too. There is one on this side that the lifeboat ran up on, but called Flat Rock. I haven't been able to find it. We've gone in to have a look for it a few times, but I haven't been able to find it. So I don't think it affects anything with our draft.
Christine, on the half-tide rock, if you go out any time, like at half-tide, from low water to half-tide, come round the tower to go up, you'll see it there.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's just on your right, just beyond the tower, there's a little bay, and in fact, the ferries bring people and put them ashore, and they go in either left or right.
Left, right. You can go around it. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. And I had a problem 2 years ago, but when many years when the boys started, when my own lads started sailing squibs, I took them out to show them the rocks at low water. And I had William Lacey with me as well. And the boys, it was a beautiful flat morning. And motoring past, you could see the half-tide rock just on your right, going up, and suddenly, Dad, reverse. There was another reef underneath, out about, probably, certainly the distance from the window to here, maybe a little bit more.
Wow.
And William turned around and said, "Just remember Dad saying something about that." Billy Lacey was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And this is back in, like Billy's been racing here since the 60s, and he was absolutely, and in light airs, night, he always knew that the ebb started inshore. We were saying the squibs in 1980, 81, and suddenly Billy's gone. Where is he? He took a tack inshore and just
Gone away, yeah. It makes a huge difference to your racing, huge. But also that car position, different car position on port and starboard tack, if you're beating up north of Ireland's Eye, makes a huge difference.
And does the wind direction affect that?
No, because if the waves are there for a few days, they'd be driven in the weather direction. So it works in westerly. The way you'll do it, if you actually notice that you'll be more parallel to the waves on one tack and you'll be more into them on the other. And clearly you need more drive when you're going into the waves, so you need more twists in the main. You need the car position a bit more forward. Yeah.
Sorry, for the newbies, can you just explain what a car position is?
Yeah. On your jib, it's only on the jib. And if the jib is flat like that, and you move the car position forward, it'll curve the shape of the sail. You pull the car back, it'll flatten it. So typically if you're sailing in waves, you want the car position forward and a bit of curve and twist in the sail so that you have an average position that will drive the boat when the boat is pitching and rolling around the place. Whereas if you have it flat, it'll only be correct in one position and the boat will stop. It'll lose drive over the waves.
Or something that rolls forward and back on track.
It adjusts the sheet position on the jib. Yeah. Okay. Happy? Tom, is anything particularly missing out of that, or that you would disagree with? Or what?
There's another rock 2/3 the way along the shore, and up of Ireland's Eye, heading towards Portello.
Oh, along here. Yeah. No, I've hit that.
It's called a Diddy Rock.
The Diddy Rock. Yeah.
It's 2 lumps.
It's like a bra.
I'm stuck in a dragon in it one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I called it Russell's Rock.
Russell's.
Yeah, Russell was with me in the dragon. He named it.
Yeah.
That was the
Yeah.
but in 1981, we were short tacking back
Hmm.
to the finish against the flood tide.
Hmm.
And in fact, where it is, the end of the beach on the island,
Yeah.
and the rock formation goes up,
Hmm.
and it's literally, if you look in along,
Hmm.
and it's there, and it never
It breaks.
shows. There's a lot of wheel
It breaks.
under
Yeah.
the water.
Yeah. But if you're lucky to miss that, you'll hit the trawler, the sunken trawler, ahead of it. You shouldn't be in that close.
You're racing.
Okay. Any more questions, particularly from any of the newer members, or any? Don't be shy. This is what it was about. Yeah.
The knoll thing that you're talking about, and the Cotillo's side that has the tides going up between.
Sorry, say it again.
There was something about knoll.
Oh, knoll. Yeah.
and the going up between
It's just where the tides are coming down through the North Channel, and they're coming up through the St. George's Channel. They kind of peter out of energy and stop around here, and the water is slack. So there's no particular tides at all in that area of the Irish Sea. So it is really to illustrate that the tidal wave is moving and runs out of energy there, but the tidal height is the tidal streams are run out of energy there, and the tidal height runs out of energy here, some 100 kilometres south of that, just to illustrate that they're very different. And I wouldn't suggest that you get that into your head today, but you need to think about it and get it into your head over the coming weeks and months, and that will unlock a lot of the complexity. Robert? Oh, sorry.
Can you explain why the tidal height is so low by our flow?
It's because of the tidal wave runs out of energy, I'm guessing, because unlike the stream. So it runs out of energy at that point. And you've also got the Coriolis effect, which is shoving the body of water across to the English coast and West coast. So the tidal range is going to be higher over there. So it's just the energy goes out of it. It's like if you remember the tidal wave, the tsunami that hit Thailand, it caused absolute devastation on land. But the biggest problem for the yacht charter boats that were out was they didn't know that anything had happened, but there was no harbours left for them to go back to. So they were left out at sea, but they never felt the tidal wave in the deep water. It was only when it came ashore that the energy created a problem.